Hello, this is Mary Kovach from Erie One BOCES, and I would like to talk to you today about Microsoft Teams. So let me just share my screen here. Okay. So Microsoft Teams. In case you need to contact me after today, through the course module, you can always ask me a question through the discussion, or you can email me at mkovach@e1b.org. So Microsoft Teams, what is a Microsoft team? This is a fairly new tool through Office 365, which is kind of like a one-stop location for having online conversations, sharing documents, distributing assignments if you're working with a class, and much more. So they do have Teams as well for any Office 365 business, which will be slightly different. But this is a special version of Teams for schools that have Microsoft Office 365. So these teams are designed for, and these are the 4 types of teams. You can have teams for your classes. So teachers can create their own classes through Teams. You can create one for a professional learning community with other teachers. You can create one for any staff members. So that could include anyone in a building, let's say for building-based information or district-based. And really, it could be anyone. So for example, if you have clubs or teams that may have also some individuals who aren't part of the district, they can create their own Microsoft accounts, and you can enable guest access. Just a caveat to that, a district admin for your Office 365 would have to enable that access. So it may be turned off by default. If it's something you needed, you would talk to your district Office 365 technical administrator. So how to access Teams. This is going to be through your Office 365 homepage or your Office 365 app launcher. So the 9 dots that kind of look like a waffle. And I'll show you how you can get started with Teams. So I'll walk through that. You would click, once you're there, on Join or Create a Team. So if you're a staff member or a teacher, not a student, you can create a team. Students can join teams, or you can add students to your class. So either you're adding individual members, or you can get what's called a join code, so others can enter the code to join your team. And for a classes team, you can add students and teachers separately. So once we set that up, and I'll walk through how to set one up for classes, you'll have one area where you can add students, and then another area if you have co-teachers where you can add them. So for non-classes teams, so whether you're using it for other teachers, other staff members, you can choose whether you want to make your group private, where people would need that code or you would need to invite them, or you can make it public, where anyone in your organization can find and join, but then you can set it so that you have to approve anyone who requests membership in that team. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go into Microsoft Teams here. Let's see, I will go back to my Microsoft account. Okay, so let me go back to my Office 365 homepage here. Okay, so now from here, you can access Teams right from the homepage. So I can click on Teams. It's purple, the letter T with 2 little person icons coming out of that. Or, as I mentioned, you could click on your app launcher up here in the upper left. Okay, so now from here, I can choose Teams. If you don't see it right away, you could always click all apps, and then it should be in here for you to search as well. Okay, so I'm going to click Teams. Okay, and here it's bringing me to the last team that I was on. Okay, so again, you can see I have some already created. So I have Mrs. Kovach, grade 4 social studies. I have some different ones that are set up in different ways. So I have some that are for staff, some that are for students, and they're going to look slightly different depending on what kind of a team you create. Okay, so to create a team, once I'm here, I'm going to go to the bottom of this left-hand navigation and click Join or Create a Team. Okay, so this is where if someone gives you a join code for a team, you can enter it in right here and click Join Team. But to create one, I'll click right here where it says Create Team. Okay, so these are the 4 types of teams that you can have, and we'll talk about what would be in each of those teams. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to create one for classes. So I'm going to say, let's say 5th period ELA, let's say. Okay, I can put in a description if I want to. They also do have some templates that you can choose from. So if you have an existing class, let's say that you've already set up, let's say now I create 5th period and I want to create a 4th period ELA team and I want it to look similar, I can always use one of my teams that I have already as a template. I'm just going to go back though. Oops. Let's see. Okay, and click Next. Okay, so here's where it's unique for a classes team. So if you're working in a classes team, you want to enter your students in this tab and any co-teachers in the second tab, which is for teachers. So for students, I can just start to type their names. So for example, I have some of my colleagues here that I could search for. And once you start to type in somebody's last name, it will search for them. Oops, that's actually a student name. That's, let me see if I search for Carolyn McTuck. Okay. Add in students and teachers, and then click the Add button. I'm going to skip this for now. You can always add in users to your team later. Okay, so now in the left-hand menu, you can see I have my 5th grade ELA. So now, if I wanted to add members after the fact, I could always go back to my 3 dots. If I kind of mouse over the title in the left-hand menu, I'll get the 3 dots, and then I can go back to add members. So if you don't have all the members' names right off the bat when you're creating it, or if you wanted to get it set up first and then add students, that's how you would get them in there. But let's talk about some of the other types of teams that you have. Okay. Okay, so different kinds of teams. Okay, so teams are organized into different channels that you create. The main channel is always going to be called General. So the first channel that you're going to get, and the rest you would create on your own, are going to be under this channel called General. So under the General channel for a classes team, you would have conversations, files, a class notebook, and assignments. Okay, so we'll talk about those types of resources. So the class notebook, if you've used OneNote before, this would be an example of a OneNote class notebook. Okay, and similarly, for PLCs, you have the same things, only you don't have assignments. Same for a staff, you would have the same things, only not assignments. And for the anyone type of team, you wouldn't necessarily have a notebook, but you would have an area for conversations and an area for files. So we will talk about what I mean when I say conversations, what you can do there, and what you can do in the files area. But if you need some more resources readily available, you can click the plus next to the default tabs that you have. Okay, so the default tabs would be these 3 or 4 across the top, and then click the plus to add in other tools. So again, it could be a shortcut to a document. For example, a class syllabus that you access all the time could be a shortcut to another app that your group or your course uses all the time. So really, it's just kind of a nice way to give a shortcut to resources that you want readily available for that class or that group. Okay, so we'll look over here at some other types of groups. So you see, for example, when I click on my staff, it gives me my staff notebook. And again, the general tab is going to be, the general channel is going to be your default channel. Okay, so if I needed to add in another tab for this general channel, excuse me, I'm going to click on the plus, and you'll see that I can choose from any of these options. Okay, so let's say that it was a particular Word document. I'm going to click here. Okay, and then if I had files in this group, I could kind of pin them right to that area. Okay, so the same thing, if I had a form that I wanted to add in, that somebody would fill out all the time, I could add that. So this is where then I can add in any of the resources. So for example, some are apps as well. So if I wanted to add in, for example, Flipgrid, a lot of teachers use this to have sort of a video discussion within their classes. I can install that app as well. Okay, so in here, I can create, for example, then log in with my educator login. Okay, and then make that part of the class. Okay, so I'm gonna put in my Flipgrid code here, for example. Oops. Okay, I'm just going to copy. So this is just an example, okay, of an app that you can use. I'm going to click Save. All right. So now you have this additional tab that's available right away from that general channel within your notebook. Okay. So some other features that you have, let me go back to our presentation here. So I mentioned that we have our general channel, but you can also create additional channels. And I like to think of channels as different topics, let's say within a class, or different folders. If you have a repository for professional learning, or repository for documents for your staff, you can create those as separate channels. So again, for your team on the left-hand side, you can click on the 3 dots that are right across from the name of your team, and you can click Add Channel. So you can see here, for example, in my Grade 4 social studies, I created New York State history discussion, okay? So you're always gonna have general and then whatever channels you create. Now each channel also has its own separate conversations, files, not a notebook, but an area for group notes, for channel notes. And also you can create your own custom tabs by clicking on the plus for each of the channels you create, okay? A nice added bonus as well is for any channel, you can get an email address. So again, the conversations we'll talk about more, but let's say it's a discussion post that you want to share with students. Instead of going to Teams, logging in and navigating there, it gives you the option of getting an email address that it generates for your team. And then you can just email that address and that will post onto your channel under the conversations. Okay, so now I'm going to go to, for example, my 5th grade ELA class here and click on my 3 dots and click add channel. Okay, so let's say I'm going to create one for grammar and usage and I'm going to click add. Okay, so now I can mark this as a favorite if I want to. Okay. And now from here as well, if I click on the 3 dots, I can get that email address. Okay. So then this is the address that you can just, let's say, save. And then you can use that and just email that address to post onto your team, into the conversations. Okay, so managing your team. Okay, so for your team, again, you go to the 3 dots and you can choose manage team. Okay, so from here, again, we talked about this is where you can add more team members. But also, again, if it's a team that you created and made public, then this is where you could see those pending requests. So again, if there are people who wanted to be part of your team and you had to approve them, here is where then you can approve those requests. Okay, and then under the settings, when you go to manage team, you can do things like change the theme. So again, just kind of a look and feel of your team. You can choose permissions. So what different members with different roles in your team can do and what guests in your team can do as well. Okay, you can choose who can use @mentions, and we'll talk about that when we talk about conversations. And here's also where you can generate that team code so that if users want to join your team, they can use a team code. Okay, so what I'm going to do actually is create a team that would be for anyone. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to join or create a team. Click create a team, and this one I'm going to choose as anyone. So let's say I'm going to call this girls varsity, varsity swim team. Okay. So now if it's not a classes team, here's where you can choose your privacy. Okay, so private means only team owners can add in members. So then you would have to add the members. This public means anyone in your organization can find this and join. So if I only want it to be private, I can choose that. I'm going to click next. Okay. And now I can start typing in someone's name or a group that I have in Microsoft. So again, if I do a search for somebody's name, I can add them in, but I won't actually add her in. So I'm going to skip this for now. Okay, so now for the girls varsity swim team, I'm going to click on my 3 dots and I'm going to choose manage team. Okay, so now here is where I can add members in. Okay, so when someone asks to join my team, I would see it under pending requests. And this is also another place where I can add channels, in addition to the way that I showed you. I can say, for example, swim meet schedule, and I can click add. Okay, so now let me go back to manage team. Okay, under the settings, if I want to, I can add in a team picture. I don't know if I actually have one that's of swimming on here. Let's see, I think this one might be pretty close. Let's see, well, that's fishing, but either way, let me add that. Click save. Okay. Okay, so now here, I can change the member permissions. So if I don't want all members to be able to post, then I can change some of these permissions here of what members and what owners can do. I can also have guest permissions. So if I want to allow guests to create or delete channels, I can do that. I would just probably be careful about that. But I know sometimes if it's a club, you might have people who aren't in the organization who join. Okay, you can choose who can do @mentions and conversations, which we will talk about. Okay, and then here, this is kind of the method that I like if you're going to have people join. So instead of having to add users in directly, what you can do is you can generate a team code. Okay, and so now this is what you would share with other users so that when they log into their Microsoft account, they can join your Microsoft team. Okay, and they do have some fun things too. If you want to enable stickers, memes, and emojis, again, that would be something that's up to you. If it seemed like you had a class and your students weren't using it properly, you certainly could take those functions away. But I think also might be sort of something that's motivating for students then to use that. Okay, and then you can choose your apps from here as well. Okay, so I can also go to the Microsoft Store and I can search for some free apps from there. Okay, so just a few more options that you have. Okay, so now we'll talk about some of those things that we mentioned. So for example, conversations. Okay, so team conversations or channel conversations, because you can have conversations for individual channels within your team, aren't just text. You can also, you can even do a video chat if you wanted, but you can include documents, you can include videos, stickers, many more things, attachments, anything you want to be part of sort of a chronological or reverse chronological conversation within that channel of your team. And kind of a nice feature too is if you want to mention someone specifically in a conversation post, you can type the @ symbol and then you can search for their name. Okay, so when I do that, if I type in @M, for example, it's going to start to search for any of my colleagues who maybe have that letter in their name. Okay, and when you include that @ symbol to that person, it will send a notification that they were mentioned in the conversation. So again, the notifications, let me just go back to my Office 365 here. So notifications, depending on how they have them turned on, will either just be up here when they log in under this bell. Okay, you might get notifications there. Or under settings, you can choose how you want notifications. So again, if you use Microsoft Outlook, you can choose to get a new email message as well whenever somebody mentions you in that team conversation. Okay, so let's take a look at some team conversations here. Okay, so let's say for girls varsity swimming, I click on general, and here my first tab is the conversations. Okay, so it does have to be somebody who is in your team. So actually, let me see if I can go to one of my other teams here. And so when you go to conversations, it actually tells you type the @ to mention someone. So now if I do the @ and then type in, let's say and it suggests Andy Wheelock, it's going to @ mention him. Okay, so the things you can put into your conversations. I can format my text if I want to here. Put in links if I need to, just by clicking on this A. So you see I could put in a hyperlink. I could click here to put in a file attachment, which I can either pull something in from my OneDrive. Okay, so it's going to search through my OneDrive. Or I could upload a file. I can put in one of these emojis. That's what I was talking about when you can allow or disallow emojis. Some of them are animated ones. You have some stickers, which kind of look like emojis, but they have some different ones that you can search from here. Okay. And you can do actually a video meeting, which is synchronous, or you can set it for later. You can do that as well. Something that maybe you could use, let's say, for staff meetings. Might be something in the future where as long as someone is logged in and they're part of that synchronous conversation, that they are technically at a staff meeting. If I click here on some more options, there's any number of other apps that I could add in. And then once I type it in, I'm going to click on the send arrow near the lower right. And then that's going to post the message to the team. So the other option, as I mentioned, if I go to, let's say here, to my email address. So let's say that I bookmark or I add this email address to my contacts. I can actually go in and I can email my conversation. So again, even if I'm not in my Microsoft team, I could certainly do this. Okay, so I'm going to say, let's say, Grammar Girl, please listen to today's Grammar Girl podcast. Okay, so now if I send that, that's actually then going to post right into my Microsoft team. Okay, so now if I go here, you can see that that email actually created a post within here. So now others could reply to that post and do anything else that they could in a conversation that they start. So that's how you can use conversations. Anything that you attach through files does go into your files area. So for example, if I go back to my 4th grade social studies here, and because I added this immigration video into this conversation, because you can attach a video as well, So because I did that, then it also would go into the files for my team. And any email messages would go here as well. Okay, so that brings me to the next section, which is files. Okay, so yes, it's going to be something that will look very similar to what you have in your Office 365 OneDrive. And as I mentioned, every channel, not just every team, but every channel within your team has its own shared area for files. So again, this is also a nice way that you can organize your files from the top level. It really gives you a lot of options for organization, okay? So in here, by default, it's shared with all of your group members. So you can have things in this sort of group OneDrive if you want to. You also have the option to add on another cloud storage. So let's say that before you had Office 365, you were using resources from a Google Drive that you created. You could easily add in and link in a cloud storage from Google Drive, Dropbox, or any other service. So when I go to my team here, if I click on Add Cloud Storage under the files, you can see I can add any of these. Okay, so SharePoint would be from another Microsoft, let's say, group that you have, Dropbox, Box, Share File. I haven't really used too much, but the Google Drive, if I click here, then I would have to sign in with my Google account, but then I could add in that folder. Okay, I'm just gonna go back. So then that's a nice way that you can also then bring in that integration. Okay. So you do also have this area that's called notes. But again, the notes for each channel, it's a OneNote, but again, it's kind of more of just a shared notes area. If we're talking about Class Notebook, that looks a little bit different. So for example, I'm just going to go to my main tab here, my General tab, I should say. Okay, so I'm going to go to General, and the Class Notebook, that's going to look a little bit different here. Okay, so here is where then I could set up a OneNote Class Notebook. For those who haven't used OneNote Class Notebook, the way it works is there are 3 separate sections. There's a collaboration space where both teachers and students can edit content. A content library where teachers can add, edit content, but students can only view it. They can't make changes. And then each student in your class will get their own notebook that only they can edit and see. So students can't edit or see others' notebooks, but teachers can see and edit any student notebook. And then you can choose which sections you would create. You can always add sections or take some away. Add your own custom sections. So I can say, let's see, I'll call one extra credit, let's say. Okay. And I'm going to click create. So what it allows you to do is you can push content out to students, for example, a template, and then you will always have access to see how students are doing on those assignments. So it's a way for you to check student notebooks virtually. So let's say it was something with spelling words and practice. It's something where then you could check their work, let's say, throughout the week. So if I click here, if I had students in the class, I would see a separate notebook for each of them. But I also have my collaboration space and my content library. which again, content library, only teachers can edit, but everyone can view. Collaboration space, both teachers and students can edit and view, okay? And then I could add additional sections and then additional pages within those sections. Really, OneNote is a topic itself for another workshop altogether, but Class Notebook does give you some excellent options. But that brings me to probably the last part of our webinar, which is the tab that's unique to the classes teams, which are assignments. Okay. So again, assignments are only available in what's called the classes version of Teams. So again, if you are using something like this, let's say for an online course that was professional development, maybe instead of a PLC, you'd want to choose classes if it's something where you're assigning things. But generally, you're going to use this with students and teachers. Is generally how that would work. Okay, so assignments are always accessed from the general channel of your classes team. So you would click the drop down next to create once you go to the assignments tab, and then you would choose new assignment, and I'll walk you through that process. So from here, you can add resources for students. So let's say that there's a template that you want them to use, or let's say a reading passage, something that you want them to complete. You can pull that in from your OneDrive, or you can upload a file or share a link. Okay. And so those are under the Add Resources section once you create an assignment. And then you can either assign it to all students, which is the default, or let's say it was just certain students who maybe needed to make up an assignment. You could choose just specific students by clicking on this person icon. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my course here. Okay, and I'm in my assignments tab. Okay, so now if I had an assignment, I could click on that and I could assign it, or I could review it if I click review. But of course, I don't have any student assignments submitted right now. But if I wanted to create an assignment, I can click create and I can choose new assignment. It also does give you the option to work off of an existing assignment as a template. If it's something that's very similar, if it's, let's say a weekly assignment that follows a similar format, and this would allow you to not have to recreate the wheel. Okay, so I'm going to click on new assignment. Okay, so here's where I can choose what classes to assign it to. Okay, so I can assign it to more than one class at a time. Okay, so I put in my world history and geography as well. Okay, so now instead, I'm going to assign it to those 3 classes, not just my grade 4 social studies. And I'll call this geography assignment, let's say. Okay, and then here is where I could click add resources. And I can either pull something in from my OneDrive. Okay. Go to one of these folders, or I can just choose a file from here. Let's see. See what I could choose from here. Okay, so I'm going to click on my map sample here. Okay, now once you add that in here, you can choose whether it's just one copy that students can see where they can't edit, or you can set it so that each student would get his or her own copy. So if it's something where students would have to, let's say, edit their own information. So let's say it was a template that they needed to complete. You can choose students edit their own copy. So I could say, please complete your geography spreadsheet in Excel by next Friday. Okay. So that brings me to the next part, which is the due date. So let's say that I'm going to set the due date for the 28th. I can set a due time if I want to. Okay. If I don't want this to show up, if I don't want the assignment to show up until later, I can choose to assign that starting at a certain time. Otherwise, it's going to be posted for students to access immediately. Okay. And you can choose whether it's out of points or not, whether you allow late turn-ins. Also, you can add a rubric that you've already created, or you can create a new rubric from here. Okay, so then you can add in your different rubric criteria, and then you can choose to attach that to your assignment. Okay, so now I'm going to click Assign. Okay, and it's going to kind of show me today where that assignment is. So now I could edit it if I needed to. I could click Review if I had some student submissions. Okay, and notice too, it's going to tell students over on the left-hand side by a number if there's new content. So if there's a new assignment, it's going to give them that notification as well. Okay, so now you see I'm getting the notifications for each of the classes I assigned it to. So it's really a nice feature. I know that some features of Office 365 were taken away. So this is kind of a nice area where you can set up your classes and assign things to students and have sort of a one-stop shop for your class. But again, for other types of groups, it's really filling a need where maybe you also need PLCs for just your teachers, or an area that does a lot of things for the staff in your building. And yes, finally, a way that you can have a team and have guests join your team as well. So if it was a guest who wanted to join your team, they would have to create their own Microsoft account. So you can create a free Microsoft account. Let me just go to a guest window here. Okay. So if I go to office.com, if I click sign in, okay, and it says no account, create one. So then here is where someone could put in their email address. So, and click next. And they'll create a password for themselves. Oops, has to be at least 8 characters. Okay. They'll receive a code just to prove it's really them creating the account. They would enter that code and then click next. And then that would create their Microsoft account. And then they would be able to join your team. I won't actually walk through that part right now. What I would like to do is show you how you can complete and get credit for this webinar. Okay, so if you're viewing this webinar, let me just log back in here. Okay. If you're viewing this webinar, then you've already found the course module for Microsoft Teams. Okay, and you viewed the video. There's also a Microsoft Teams quiz. So the way you get credit for the course is you complete the quiz and you have as many attempts as you want. And once you reach a score of 80% or higher, you'll receive a certificate of completion, which will show up in the news section of the course. So once you've successfully completed the quiz, you're going to click on News at the top of this course, and then you'll have a certificate that looks similar to this, which then I could click on my drop down and choose View. And then from here, if I needed to print it out, I could go to File, Print, which then I could print it, or of course, then I could choose to save it as a PDF as well. So that's how you would get your certificate. But let me just show you what else you would need for that quiz. So also, as it mentions here, you need a secret code for the quiz. Okay, and I'm going to show you what that secret code will be. Okay, so the secret code is Microsoft channel. Teams are organized into channels, your team. So no spaces, all lowercase. So you will need to enter that in order to take the quiz. Okay, and then also once you've submitted at least one attempt, let's say you didn't get the 80%, what you could do is you could retake it, but then you would also have access to the presentation that we looked at. So then if you need some additional support, you would be able to click here, and then you can review some of the Microsoft Teams options that we looked at to maybe help you to answer the quiz questions. Okay. Okay, and also what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a discussion area. Please email me at mkovach@e1b.org. Call this 0365 webinar questions. Okay, and I'm going to call this one Microsoft Teams questions. Okay. So if you have questions, you're going to click where it says Start a New Thread. Okay, so again, if you have a question about Teams that you want to ask, you can click Start a New Thread, and then you can post a question, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Try to, within a day or so, to make sure I answer your questions. So you can access that area from the course module or by clicking on Discussions. Okay, so let me go back to here. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little background into what you can do with Microsoft Teams, the different kinds of teams that there are. So again, if you have any questions, please email me with the email address that's provided, or you can post to the discussion area. Thank you, and I hope to see you again for more webinars soon. Have a good one.